Make my life easier. So today the idea is to share a bit part of the work that we've been doing the last the last year. But also to give you a bit of background also on a specific research area that we are starting to develop more. So it will be kind of a, not a two-part session, but there will be first a bit more of a context or background on this research area, and then the specific project that we've been working on. I would say that compared to maybe the last session that we ran today, more than ever, I'm very happy to stop, especially because I don't know where my voice will allow me to reach. So if you want to stop any moment, questions, clarifications, I'm very open for that. The research project I'm presenting is part of a joint work that I'm doing with Kari, that is a PhD student in his third year, and Silke Tekmaya, that is also my colleague in the entrepreneurship area. This is a paper that I am the one who is more obsessed, so I'm the one who's leading the paper. By the way, today I don't have any introduction about the university. I go directly to the topic. But the picture that you see here, this is the engineering building in the Odense campus. It's the largest campus that we have. And I might be messing it up, but those are pictures of or shapes of fractals, or should be something related to fractals or forms. And that's what they were telling me, because I want to use this. Later I have an example of specific application of fractals. So that was my excuse to use this picture. It's a bit of a, it doesn't follow the usual research presentation, but because I'll tell you this more from my personal view, my personal experience. What happened here is that as I had been working for that moment a few months at the university, I was starting to be surprised when my colleagues from the physics and nano department, nanotechnology department, they were coming to me saying, we have so many nice things in the lab that we don't sell, that we don't commercialize. It's a pity, because me as a researcher, I was a scientist, I have little incentives to try to sell this and commercialize this. And I was like, okay, I don't know if it's a pity or not, I don't know. For me it was even difficult to understand some of the projects that they had. But I come from a background a bit of consulting and a bit of also business management and also a bit of engineering management. And for me the idea that something cannot be solved or something cannot happen, it says, okay, now there has to be a strategy for that. So it's not a problem of technology, it's a problem of a strategy. I'll tell you what happens before I just explain, so that you, because later this example also comes out again. Probably some of you in the room understand this better than me, but basically this is a diagram or a drawing showing how you can detect a specific type of molecule or gas that is cadaverine. Cadaverine comes out when there is a meat putrefaction. When there is meat starts to get rotten, then this thing comes out. And we have a couple of colleagues in the department that they were very interested in developing applications with cantilever, also now with plasmonics, to be able to detect when a gas at a nano level starts to be there, present. You can imagine this in water, you can imagine this in the air. So this has kind of interesting applications. But my colleagues, the researchers that we would have lunch together and maybe some drinks some days, they just care about these layers here. That's their, all the other thing is the setup in the lab. They have a clean room where they can work with this, but they are specialists on developing these organic sensors and these thin layers that are, this is kind of what they like to do. But what I like to do is another thing. I like to do strategy. So for me, everything is a strategy. Everything is about choices. So when I first started looking at this problem, I said, okay, this problem is a classic issue of technology commercialization. And going to the very old papers on technology commercialization, we know that the way that you should choose the strategy depends on what type of assets you need to commercialize that technology. So if you have, for example, if you can protect anyone coming into this market because you have IP, then you can choose options that maybe if you don't have IP or you don't have patents, you cannot choose. The same happens again with what I was mentioning in the example of the complementary assets that you need to have in the next steps. So you are at the very beginning, you are at the R&D area. And then depending on what you answer, again, very simple, almost consulting style, 2x2 type of matrix, And then you say, okay, you end up in a place where you say, okay, you cannot protect using IP. You also can innovation be started? So actually, no. Here, you are able to. Sorry, can innovation be started? I always get confused. Getting to the point. So basically, this is a situation where I can protect, I can have the IP, but I cannot actually. I need to develop assets. So if I need to develop assets, it will be very hard for me. This is the example. If you become an R&D factory, so you have very interesting patents, but then you have to license them always to other players in the industry. The opposite example is this idea of the attacker's advantage. When you say here you cannot protect the IP, but also you don't need specific assets to commercialize. So here the story is to go as fast as possible into the market. When I was looking at this type of cases, then we're saying, okay, then maybe it's just an issue about choosing the right way. Should you be doing patenting and then licensing, or should you try to develop a commercial solution with this device inside and then sell it to someone that could use this tool? In this case, maybe, I don't know, a supermarket or something like this. But what this again is an old framework. This was assuming that people or researchers or scientists would have just to make a choice based on if they have IP or not, or if they need to own or not the complementary assets to sell those products. But what we have been seeing, and I will show you also the specific examples, but that this is not actually a one-time choice, as you can imagine. So firms don't make this choice once, and then they have to stay the whole lifetime of the company just doing licenses. People change, because this framework didn't take into account that maybe it's good to start one way, or it's good to combine more than one of those options, because you learn about how the market works, and then you decide to develop a product, or you decide to also do licensing because there are some markets that you cannot reach, or they are not interesting for you. So this is again from the old 2003 model, but then, sorry, the more recent or nicer work that comes out also from Marx and Llull says, no, actually, we should take into account that companies learn, companies can change, and then they develop this nice concept of switchbacks. That is basically the idea that you can change your strategy. Because as you start, maybe you go for the product market, the idea that you go all in, so you own IP, or maybe you don't own IP, but you decide to commercialize by yourself, bring it to the market, then call it the researcher, then he would create his academic spin-off, and he would go all in, even owning the production and distribution of the future product. And then, but if you are just, let's say, aiming for this market, but then at some point you realize that it makes sense to maybe think twice, because maybe it's worth that you start entering or making agreements with other people to commercialize via licensing, and not only just selling the product that you want to do. The same thing was happening on the other angle, and they used I think it's the speech recognition industry to identify those patterns. But what they identify is that some companies, they start with the goal to maybe be doing cooperative commercialization. This is the meaning that instead of trying to create your own company, you accept you are a feature, so you will be licensing to Google or licensing to Microsoft your solution, or even offering services. But then at some point you realize that maybe it's interesting that you develop a product, because then you can get bargaining power, you can get more brand recognition, and then maybe you can get more licensing deals with other companies. So maybe it makes sense that you change. So the whole story of the switchback. It's not my intention to go into a lot of detail on this, but at least the way I read this, the interesting thing is this whole story of this dynamic commercialization strategy. Because before we thought that companies would not learn, and that's, as I think we all know, that's not the case. Companies learn, adapt, and modify their strategies. So learning is important. I usually understand things better with examples, and I like this one very particularly because it comes from the UPC in Barcelona. Okay. So this is a group of professors from this university, the Polytechnic University of Catalonia in Barcelona, that they had been working in these fractal applications, or using fractals for the development of antennas for cell phones. They were doing this, I think that Puente started in 1999, so quite a long time ago. And they were always patenting. And they had done some collaborations with companies, But it was not until 2007 that they really started having to get, they really had to get serious. And in 2007 they started to get serious because they started to see that some of the large telephone companies like Samsung, at that time I think it was also some of the Chinese players, HTC, with Nokia I think they had an agreement, but with some of the other ones they started to realize that they were using their patents and their knowledge without paying them, or without acknowledging that. They became, I think it's the only case we have in, at least in Barcelona area, an IP-based company. So they completely focused their strategy, no, we are going to be licensing and we have to be experts on developing ideas and selling them, and we need to fight against all those companies that are, they managed, they were successful. If you want to hear stories about Fractus, I can share those stories, they are very interesting. And then after they are, I think that they have now actually around these 400 million, but this I think it's quite recent. At that time, 2007 was not still, was much less than that. It was only in 2017 that they decided to launch their first product. And this was kind of a surprise. I said, okay, why do you now launch a product when you've been always doing IP licensing? And that was because they realized that it was quite interesting that their technology could be now not necessarily part of a telephone, but maybe it will be part of another type of device, sensor, another electronic device. It might not be a... So they had a chance to maybe develop a product that could be interesting for this market, and that they decided to do that by themselves. They broke the company, they created a different unit, and now this is, let's say, we have now an IP licensing company and also a product company. As you can imagine, our argumentation here is that there has been learning. So there has been a process of learning about how the market works, when it makes sense to license, when it makes sense to make a product, and all these elements. So getting into this point, for us then, and going back to the story that we had at the beginning, the interesting thing is, okay, if those companies have to spend 10 years learning about the market before they can make a good decision, or they can adjust their decisions, how come we expect our scientists and researchers that don't have relationship with the market, that they can do those choices well by themselves? Because that's what, when we had some discussions with, said, oh, they should be able to know if they want to do an academic spin-off, or they just want to do a patent or license, they should be able to do these market strategies. And then, kind of our takeaway was that, no, they are not able to do that, because not even companies that are kind of working full-time on that can do it. Therefore, we have to do something. And the question for us is, what can we do in our campus, in our university, to understand better how this process works? Can we change this process a little bit? And that's what we try to do. So, going back to our starting point, again, you can imagine this, in this case, the researcher is Joanna. She has been working on this area for quite a while. So the question was, can we change the way that she works, or she would work with the TTO, the Technology Transfer Office, or other people to commercialize their research? Can we help her in some way? And something that we thought about looking at is that maybe we can modify the starting point. This whole concept that the fact that the researcher doesn't know much about the market, and doesn't know, and it makes it difficult because the market logics and the research logics or academia logics are very different. So maybe we could do something to help her to start moving. This is the whole idea that we had behind, and the motivation for this. Last week I also was showing you this graph. Is the whole idea, can we reduce this valley of death, that this here is not the startups, but is the commercialization of science or research. The first issue we had when we started looking at this more from an analytical point of view, okay, what can we do? We had some ideas, but the first thing we needed to understand better was how does the process work for our university, and most universities when it comes to the TTO, or the Technology Transfer Officer. The classic way of understanding this process, or even a classical traditional way, is that this is a one-line sequential process. You cannot get away, and there is a key element that is the patent application. So if your idea that you disclose is patentable, then you get support from the university, and then things happen. Or maybe you end up licensing, maybe you do a spin-off. I'm still quite new in this area. So, but when we started looking at other articles, we realized quickly that there is a lot of people that say that this is not what happens. Actually, what happens is this. So that universities don't have control on the research that happens in the university. And a lot of things, they basically what we highlight, they bypass the TTO, and that's even kind of a research area. Why do people bypass TTOs? And that means that if, assuming, and again, we are very lucky because our university had a very traditional, still has a very traditional approach, so we could understand more these type of conflicts that emerge. So if you disclose to the TTO evaluates, then maybe you go to get additional funding, the university holds the title of the invention, then there are other stories about who owns what, how much do they own, that depends on different university systems. Then you have an IP, and then maybe things happen. But then the nice question is when you were talking with some of the researchers saying, no, but everyone knows that this is not the only way. So some of us create a company, some of us talk to other companies that we have relationships. I was thinking, okay, this doesn't look or doesn't sound too good, no? But this is actually how a lot of impact, indirect impact, ends up happening, and a lot of societal contributions ends up happening. So this means that we have a kind of an issue with at least the way we see it is that there is a problem with the governance and the models that we have of our TTO. I'm talking again from our case. So, and that's, I've been using the work, I think it was from her PhD thesis from Samantha Bradley, that works with Chris Hayter and Albert Link on this. And they did this very nice summary of all the whole story about the TTOs and the evolution. They propose, and that also motivated us, this idea of a collaborative organization. So they say, actually, we should maybe start changing the idea that the TTO is a closed box, so actually we should have, and they put the internet here in the middle. Maybe now if they do it again, they would put another name here, because I don't know what, maybe it's a platform, maybe it's a, that combines knowledge about IP, collection of tacit knowledge, idea of how does it work on the standards or licenses, and knowledge of the research problems, and then on the other hand it has the industry participants, and then we can connect. But as you can see also here, it's not only researchers, it's also the TTO, and it's also scientists, and we could even, in our case, we think that we should have students also, master students, bachelor students, and PhD students. So again, yeah, our idea is that this allows for more learning processes. Instead of one sequential way that if you don't make it, you are dropped, and you don't get the chance to play again or to change your strategy, readjust, and so on.
Just a question. Is this dotted line integrating the TTO?
I think no. I think that I would need to read again, but I think that they see the TTO here.
Okay.
So this is
a tool
in existing, yeah, but they have not developed this mode.
Okay.
They come. The group is at least Chris and also Samantha at that time is in Arizona State University. That is one of the in the technology transfer area. They are good, or they have good practices. So I don't know if they develop something like a working model, but no, I think it's something that doesn't. It's not maybe even tangible. Maybe it's another type of organization. Maybe it's a platform. I don't know. So here it's at the point that I like to break and then move to the specifics of the project that we did. So this was all the background that we had, things that we had been reading, that we were kind of interested in, and then we said, okay, we need to do a project. We need to try this. We need to see how can we change something in this area. Sorry. So here again, the background is what you just saw. This article, the thesis from Samantha Bradley. And then we said, okay, we would like to introduce the element of the students. And the reason why we wanted to introduce the students in the mix is because I also, again, these are a lot of personal biases here, but I come from, or I've been doing some work on academic entrepreneurship. And we realized that the researchers and faculty are not always the best entrepreneurs. Actually, students are the ones who create a lot of entrepreneurial activity. And there has been a bit of a discussion that, okay, maybe we should start trying to make those things happen in a more generative way. That the students get involved with the faculty when they are still in the university. They try to create projects. What I'm saying here, it sounds like normal, but in other places it's kind of, oh yeah, maybe we should do that. And they were, so there is some nice work from Siegel and Bright discussing this idea that we need to put more the student in the whole academic entrepreneurship story. But what we still don't, or we don't have that much clear vision is, we see that the students, for example, when they get involved, sometimes they are the ones who launch the company, who create the academic spin-off at the end, together with the professor as the CTO. But these type of roles, we've seen them, and they are documented. But what we don't see that much is what happens at the beginning. So our question here is going again with the Roanna case of the cantilever and the cadaverin, is can she get help at this moment? Not when she already has a client, and then the student join in and they create a company and help her to do this type of more business development. Can they help earlier, in earlier phases? We, at that time, and we are still using this, we were borrowing a concept from entrepreneurship. In entrepreneurship, there is a lot of discussion about what are opportunities, if you create them, if you discover them. But what we like on this process was this idea that opportunities go from sometimes being very subjective, being almost an idea, to something that you can objectify, that you can explain, that you can share. We were saying, okay, maybe it's a similar situation, no? That you have an idea that the technology can be used for something, but it's very subjective. You even find it difficult to explain it and to write it down. And then maybe there is a process of construction or objectification that then you can actually share it. And then you can make a drawing and a diagram. And says, okay, maybe we see, or we can look at this as a similar situation, no? That there is an objectification process. Again, this is a bit of our, I'm being very open on what we were carrying on our backs when we were entering in this research question. So at the end, we were opening up the research question to something very general, like what is the role of a student in the early stages of technology development? And we were already aiming at not only what is the role, it's like, let's see if they generate some types of contribution or not. What did we do? So this is a bit of bricolage, as you will see. So we have the master course with our engineering students that we think they are great, and they are persons that combine these engineering views with innovation, with entrepreneurship perspectives. And we were having a course that was called High-Tech Business Venturing. This course in the past had been to develop a business plan or do this type of work. We wanted to change the course. It had been for a while on the table. And then we used this as a perfect excuse to change the course that we so much wanted to modify. What we then did is that we started asking to the researchers that we had in our labs, in our campus, if they had any ideas that they would like to explore, but they don't have time or they don't prioritize. And then we came out with, from different people, different researchers, some of them more experienced, other ones even PhD students, we did kind of a list. And from that list, we tried to then, okay, we tried to select the cases. I think I'll explain later how we selected them. And then we converted those ideas from the researchers as the starting point. And the whole concept was that the researcher will have to be involved during the whole semester as a mentor, as a coach of the group, as even potential CEO, potential CTO, whatever the role, but just that would have to give them feedback and would have to work with them.
Just one question: to what extent researchers are willing to participate in this kind of experience?
I think if we had done this, the way that the TTO works with the researchers, and this stays among us, I hope that the video doesn't. Anyway, so good. No, it's okay, it's okay. But I think that the way that the TTO has to engage with them is the formal way. So usually the TTO has to send an email to everyone or the heads of the departments and asks, please, I will come and I want to see what you have. And, but we follow a different way. because I know it's a small campus, so I know most of the people, and I know also the people that are active in doing research or that have some ideas and this type of things. So I went to talk to them, to all of them. And, so it was more informal mechanism.
Yeah, still bricolage.
Yeah.
Actually, one question is about the level of the research, the level of the research. For instance, if fundamental research, physics, principal physics, or I don't know, or quantity, or if there is more engineering level, or if they use something.
I think I'll
because it's different, or
in 2 slides I show you the samples of the technologies they are working on.
okay.
But I can tell you this year we are repeating this design with some changes in the milestones and deliverables, but the same story. It's the first, well, last year we didn't have to, but this year we have had to drop one project after 3 weeks because it was too much advanced in the future. So we were looking at the smart surfaces with plasmonics.
Yeah.
And the students after 2 weeks, they loved plasmonics because they understood that it's a combination of electronics, nano, and that it has a lot of future. It's super, with even quantum computing involved if you want.
Mm-hmm.
But they said, but all applications are at least 10 years ahead. And the problem is that the technologies are still not there, even so they will not be able to engage with anyone. Oh, that's what they said. So after 2 weeks we gave up and we changed, and we put them another technology on the table. But I'll show you that because I think it's, for me it's not fully related, but to the TRL idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's very hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe that's one of the takeaways. Maybe not all technologies, not all research projects are suitable for this. Maybe we need other approximations. That's, again, it's a semester. Oh, sorry, Rob.
What about the IP?
We involved the TTO. What we did is that it was a different way of working. We brought in the TTO after 2 weeks of the course, when the researchers knew that this would happen. And then the TTO came, the person, and looked at all the projects and decided if any of them he wanted to be kind of already involved and maybe patenting, or he said, no, this project, you have to try more and then you let me know.
Yeah, but in Caso, he said, okay, this one can be patenting. About the work, the team.
Yeah.
There is one researcher with 3-5 master students.
Yeah.
What about the master students and what about the IP for them?
What we discussed also at the beginning is that the work, the technology work, belongs to the researcher. Because he's coming with this, putting this on the table.
Yeah.
And that they would need to decide if they believe that there is chances to adjust the technology when they do a patent, and if the students will get involved in the patent application, they would have to be included.
Okay, so in fact, it depends on the maturity of the, when the researcher is coming with the technology opportunity. It depends on the maturity of the project.
And as you can imagine, most of the researchers had already paid. We are a bit concerned if then, why don't we sign already from the start that there is a kind of a tentative agreement that if something comes out, it belongs to this. The researchers and also the TTO said, don't sign anything if you don't see anything yet. I said, okay. That's something that I would say in other contexts, I would have been, we were already careful, but I would have been more careful. You will see, maybe it's because the ideas are still too raw and too...
Yeah.
I think that, 5 months, 3 to 5 students working there. How did we select? So not all projects we used for the research. So we try to, some things we try to keep it fixed, some things we try to keep capture variety. We were already trying to follow a multiple case selection criteria. No? So we were trying to be exposed to different levels of TRL. And the other thing we wanted to be exposed is that we didn't only want very junior researchers or very senior researchers, so we wanted to have also maybe even if possible a PhD student. We were lucky because there was a colleague that now has left, but that was finishing his PhD and he was still PhD student. Because it also affects a bit your expectations and maybe the involvement. We had some thoughts that this could be an influence in this collaboration process. What we didn't change is that, so basically that everything, the activities were the same for all the groups. What they had to deliver, what they had to submit, so that there would not be big differences in that. And also, at least we tried to control or knew if some of the people involved, especially the researchers, already were experienced with tech transfer or entrepreneurship. At least we wanted to document that, to see how it worked. I promise in 2 slides is the next slide that I have the technologies. What data did we collect? Most of it we used it. There is some that you will see that we have not yet used. Maybe we plan to write something else on this, and we will use. But we were collecting. The idea was to collect during 3 points in time, collect data. At the beginning, the researchers had to pitch their research idea as the way they wanted. Write half a page, add the publications, explain why do they think that somebody should work with that. In a very individual, with no constraints. We did an idea assessment at the beginning also, and at the end by students. This was more, let's say, an additional metric. I can show you the results. We don't use it that much in this research project right now. What the next data point that we used was at the middle of the course, and then we were having interviews with the groups of students without the researcher. But the other story that, the other activity we did was an interview with each of the researchers to know how it was going. I also had notes from the preparation before their document. And at the end, what we had was the reports by each of the students, teams, but specifically also what was the experience of the researcher. How did he feel, what happened, what did work, what didn't work. And again, the assessment that I mentioned. What happens during the course, just that you have all the information of what they are getting. They are getting what does it mean to do a business model, because the objective of the course is that ideally they would move the technology to a validated business model. The business model, Osterwalder style, so with a few concepts, a business case if possible, this type of aspects. And then they get lectures on IPR management, financing, marketing, pricing, segmenting customers, all those things. This is combined with other courses they are getting at that time on participatory innovation. I think that's the main one. Yeah. The technologies, fabulous. So the technologies are very different also, as you can see here. The TRL is very approximate. That's our assessment of the technology readiness level of each of the areas. One of the researchers, scientists, has an algorithm for distributed electricity charge. Basically, the idea that he has is that he has a better algorithm when multiple cars or vehicles are charging in the same station on the way that the power is being allocated. And he thinks it's very interesting, and he has had some projects working on this, and now he wants to sell it and put it in the charging stations that are in the country and all. That's the project that he has been working on. So that's the opportunity that he was explaining. Another case is a PhD student. I like this case because it's a clear case of a nice example of user innovation. So he had problems because he had to study samples that were degrading very fast. And then what they do is usually they have to use specific devices that they do the vacuum. And then this way they don't get oxidated that fast. So that's what I understand. Correct me here if I'm... And he realized how expensive those vacuum chambers were, and he said, "What? I'm going to do one in my workshop, and then I will try to do it with metal, whatever I can. I'll do one version." He managed to do a first version, but then he said, "No, I need help to develop this better prototype, check who else needs this type of vacuum chambers and microscopes, because he needs them, but he doesn't know if there is a market for that or there is no market." So that would be a almost kind of very specific, almost engineering application of what he was doing. And then the two organic sensors that we were working with, one is a cantilever organic sensor that was already tested in a lab setting that was working. And then the other project was more complex because this was still at a very early stage and using plasmonics to also detect, in this case, NOx nanoparticles. And the person is good with setup and so on, but was struggling to also understand even what type of device he should be creating, or who could use this, if it's personal use, it's industrial use, this type of aspects. Just to mention that the fruit sensor person is the only of the researchers that already had been doing something. This is the name I was mentioning before, that she had already done this with cadaverine, and now she wanted to do the same or similar thing with ethylene. Ethylene, in her case, it's interesting because it's what the fruits, as they start to ripe, also generate. And this also accelerates the maturation of other fruits that are nearby. So it's, you know better than I do on those things. So. We used a very, say, classic way of analyzing the data and the multiple cases and how we were building them, coming from management research. So we had multiple sources of data, we had to transcribe those interviews, we had to code them. And here we ended up, I think in this case, we ended up using in vivo. Not that I'm a big fan of in vivo, but we ended up using it to identify what was happening and how it was evolving the story. The way that we approach this, we follow quite a lot of the Eisenhardt approach. So the first thing that we were trying to do is also identify, as this was also longitudinal data, identify critical events, so critical moments. So what happened during those 5 months? Can we identify stages, phases, or something like this? And the next challenge that we had is, okay, does the data also explain us how those stages or elements change across time? So what made them more likely to move to the next stage, come back? Has there been any progress or no progress at all? And as you can imagine, a lot of back and forth with first ideas of how those stages would look like and what at the end I'm presenting to you. What came out from us to try to capture this process of collaboration between the students and the scientists is that we were having like 3 main, and it doesn't mean that the time that each of those steps uses is the same, but three main stages. One is that we were helping the researcher, or scientist, to give some sense to that technology or research that he was working on or she was working on. Then there was a process that was finding market applications, what we call this uncovering market applications. And at the end, as this is a very early stage process before the tech transfer office is there, we were discussing about this opportunity assessment. Does it make sense that I continue with this project? Should I just drop it and not do anything else? We needed to characterize in some way each of those stages, because the question would be, okay, how do I know if I'm in stage 1 or stage 2 or stage 3? So what we also were looking at what creates differences between the stages, what would characterize them. And the first thing that would characterize and would affect those stages was how much the technology was developed or not. So, and this also helped us to explain what the type of dynamics that were going on. So at the very beginning, the level of the technology being, for example, plasmonics, made it very hard for the students to give sense and make sense of the technology and help to the researcher. They could not almost help the researcher to what does your technology help or can be applied for. As you can imagine, in as the process evolved, they were able actually to overcome these challenges on the level of readiness of the technology, and they were able to maybe find applications and even at the end identify a possible opportunity. The other thing that was affecting or defining each of the stages was this idea of the tech-market combination. So we also we're finding out that the complexity of the technology, either because it's very early stage or because it has many different possible applications or elements, made it difficult for the students to contribute even at the process. Following the same approaches, you can see that, for example, the role of the scientists kept changing also during this process. At the beginning, the students, what we were saying is that they are just passive people that get information from the researcher. But in the other stages, what we would see is that then the scientists start changing their behavior. So they would become almost like a colleague. And at the end, it's the other way around. What we were seeing is that the scientist actually was receiving information. So it was becoming a potential partner. This evolution was being explained because the students were starting to add valuable maybe information about how does the market look like, how does the market work, what would clients expect from this type of technology, what do people actually know about plasmonics or organic sensors. So what for us was also interesting is that the development or the level of readiness of the tech also changed the way that the students were being engaged in this whole process. If they could see it as a more ready product or more ready technology, they also were likely to get much more engaged. Although in cases like the plasmonics, again, for them it's a super interesting topic that gets their attention even if they are not able to help that much. The question that then we also were putting on the table was, okay then, but how do those processes unfold? So how do we move from the first stage where they are just trying to give sense to finding some applications and to then maybe even being able to say, okay, this is a project I want to bring to the TTO and I really want to now try to patent or go for licensing or create a company, or is a project I want to drop and I just forget about this project, at least for the moment. So we were trying to now focus on this idea of what would make or generate a change from the first stage to the second stage. What we found out is that the key driver at this time was that they were able to agree on what is the technology function. So if the students and the scientists could not agree on that, they would not be able to move. And there is, I have a list of quotes at the end that we will probably not look at, but there is even this complaint from one of the researchers in the half-point meeting saying, I still have the impression that the students have not understood at all what is my technology. And this was coming from the algorithm, so the electric charging situation. He was kind of upset that he thought that the students were able to understand, and he said, no, they don't understand that I don't want to do charging stations. I just want to do a board, an electronic board, and or maybe a software that helps to manage this. I don't want to sell charging stations. So this whole idea of what is my technology, how it can be used, was blocking in this case to find a first market application. On the other side, so what would make that maybe they were about to make a step, but then they were having discussions or disputes, and then they were going back to still to try to give sense to the technology. What we found out is that some of the, so not all scientists and researchers were as open about what could they do with their technology. So some of them were, okay, I have these projects or these papers or these ideas, do whatever you want with it. So I don't even care if there will be maybe a patent or not, let's play with this. And I'm open to any of your comments about how this can be used or to which markets can be applied. Other people were no. I'm very clear that this is for cars, charging stations, and not any type of vehicles, but I want to do that in cities and in cars. So the students could come out with other ideas, like for example, that why not use this in an industrial setting where you have a lot of electric cabs actually that are moving around and they need to charge. Say, no. This is not the application I'm looking for. And this was happening also in the other projects. So this idea that you're already kind of, when you start the project, you're already predefined on what is going to happen, would make it less likely that the students would get engaged and help the researcher to find alternative market applications. What was also for us surprising is, okay, what happens when you find a market application? How do you generate then the next step where the scientist actually feels that now I have enough information to make a decision with this research or with this project? And definitely what was working incredibly well was that if there was any type of market response, any type of client says, why don't you come and we meet, and we have maybe with the R&D department, and the students had managed to make this happen, and then the scientists could go there, explain the technology. This would really help the scientists to feel, okay, I'm really getting information that is valid, is correct, and now I should make a decision. In other cases where this did not happen, we were not able to get to this situation. So in cases that there was only this hypothetical idea or desk work, yes, this could be applied for the food industry, but there was no meeting, no interaction, no real case, no even survey data, some of them did, then this would not, was not happening. Again, what we found again here is that in some cases, for example, and here the case also of the vacuum chamber, when the students started to find that actually the technology should be combined with other things, not only the vacuum chamber, but also I think it was an electric charge or another element that should be included in the vacuum system, or to be able to add gases or something like this. And in this case, the researchers say, no, 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 no. It needs to be only vacuum chamber, it needs to be cheap, it cannot be so expensive. And they could not agree on what was the actual opportunity out there. And I don't want to do 3 different versions, it has to be only one version. So the idea that, again, the purpose or what is going to be used for was fixing this whole process, was affecting the possibility of really making a decision whether they should go ahead or they should go back with the technology. Sorry.
Just one question before. In this conceptual framework, the stakeholder is only a student and scientist?
Yeah.
Is
We didn't include market as well.
There is no...
We simplified it a lot.
Yeah, the simplification is only the relation between...
Because the idea is that we were only looking at the exchanges between the scientists and the students. Because we wanted to see, not also what type of, for example, what happened when some types of market actors got involved, or other types of market actors, or what happened when, I don't know, other potential stakeholders were getting involved or not. We were only looking at this dyadic student and scientist, or student team and scientist relationship. But I think that's actually a very good point. That there are other people involved.
Yeah, because...
But you can see what happened for them. So it's also this is more actually for curiosity. But even if we were following the same deliverables or the same structure of the course, what they had to prepare and show and discuss, what was happening as an outcome at the end was very different. As you know, each project then evolves in different ways. So, for example, in the case of the clever charge, as the students were very narrow, they just ended up mapping potential clients and shaping up an entry strategy. But they struggled a lot to get to this point, and they had a lot of discussions because they didn't agree actually on the technology functions or possibilities. In other cases, in the mini vacuum, the students ended up contributing a lot in generating prototypes, because they actually, in this case, they were also, they had, all of them had the possibility, but in this case was specifically useful as it was a product, to develop prototypes and using the 3D printers, create them, evolve them. And they are actually the only ones that also saw that they could do actually, as they were maybe dealing with individual customers in research centers, they ended up doing a large survey, sending emails to researchers all around the world and getting feedback. And they even got potential buyers for this solution. In the fruit sensor, they were able to even build the mock-up, again, get some information on the market. And I think that, this is the case. They got to that situation that the researcher, then we have this nice quote from the researcher, because says that's actually what I needed, because they found the other, the perspective from the industry. So what will it make this an interesting product? And then the person in this case was from Merckx, was saying, this will be an interesting product if you can, I can put it in a container, it can hold up 3 months or 1.5 months at least without having to be replaced. It can be generating data, and it cost me less than, I think it was 200 euros. Can you do that? If you can do that, I want this in my containers. And then the researcher said, I don't know how to do that right now, because it needs to be like a shoebox. So it needs to be small, it needs to be able to be placed there, and we are still at a large scale. But that researcher said that's actually what really helped me to assess whether this project should continue or not. I know now a specific need and a specific use that could work. With the pollution sensor, although they found a very interesting also application case with the gas, the automobiles gas sensors that could be used and so on, they were not able to find, to create this as a already defined prototype. But they were able to help potential or identify potential applications. And that's what the researcher valued from them. So again, taking now a step back, so at the beginning I was explaining you the story of this cadaverine, potential sensor of cadaverine, using in this case this cantilever approach. I also explained to you the different ways of maybe the TTO organization and different ways of organizing this type of activities. I explained to you the problem that we had in our university on having a very kind of sequential process, and our question of can we involve then students And we were only focused mostly with the students at this very early stage as a type of or group or potential stakeholder that generates a different dynamics on the exploration, and that helps the researcher scientists to learn about the market without having to make the decision whether they want to license or they want to create a spin-off. That this is a very hard decision for most researchers, that it's not their main ambition. So what we could see is that in this short time, low commitment for the scientists, 5 months project, they could learn a lot of things that they would not have learned or they hadn't learned in the previous years, because they were saying, I have had this project in my drawer for the last 2 or 3 years. I have not done anything about that. So they could learn a lot. Did we manage to create academic spin-offs out of here? The cadaver in one is now active, but this was already almost active at that time. The ethylene that I mentioned is not yet active. And I don't know if we will manage to make it work. But the other ones, they didn't go ahead. So the vacuum chamber, we didn't create so we are not generating royalties for the university. So it's nothing is happening yet. But for example, the students that were working with the vacuum chamber, and that's kind of an indirect effect, they learned so much about how they can do this type of things and accelerate this, that they decided to apply this to a thing that they care more, that is about headphones that for gaming, for people that have glasses. So, and then they are using the same approach on what they learn about high technology with mechatronics and the other elements that they have included inside those headphones that are advanced and I don't know what else. On the scientists, what we managed to do is to change a bit the dynamics of the TTO approach, because the perspective that they had with the TTO and the relationship with the TTO is that it was a one-to-one relationship. So that when they wanted to do things about technology commercialization, they only could talk to the TTO. Now they know that they have a group of students, that every year they will be helping them and exploring options. And they also know that, let's say that during those 5 months, the TTO or the persons representing the TTO will also know about these projects. So it's a kind of an indirect way, less formal way to disclose what you are doing in your research. It's not that much binding. For us, the positive thing is that they are repeating. This year they are, and we had a couple more new ones, but they are repeating with other projects that they had on the table. Some of them are evolving now. For example, the NOx now is evolving into a personal sensor, the breathing, because, and also with the ethylene, we are trying also to check if that also indicates something on what happens on your lungs, whether they are working well or not. So they are pivoting the ideas, they are evolving, but so far I don't know if it's because I'm very persistent or stubborn, but they keep, we plan to keep this as a running project, that and hopefully we can extend it. I think that this was where I wanted to go. I have some of the quotes and so on, but I don't think that they will add any value. So thanks a lot for your attention.